Friends, colleagues, and supporters of no natural disasters from around the globe, welcome to a very special Failures edition, disaster edition of Blunders, Bloopers and Foul-Ups, a water and sanitation game show. We only have limited time today, so there is one quick question, but the good news is that it's everybody's favourite. It's the picture round. I'm going to show you 4 pictures that together describe a failure, and all you have to do is tell me what that failure is. So, thinking caps on, here we go. What failure do these 4 pictures describe? We have a ticking clock, we have a cyclonic weather system, we have a stack of paperwork, and 4 plastic sandcastle buckets. Do we have any brave audience members in the room who want to give me their best guess? There are prizes.
Question is again.
What failure do these 4 images depict?
Failure to plan ahead to prevent the impact of the hurricane.
A fantastic guess from the room. I've been given control of a map, so there's no way that I'm going to try and navigate to the chat to see what you're saying in the chat, but I will look at your answers later. And in this case, this failure was following Cyclone Pam in 2015, and in Vanuatu, it wiped out a lot of the water supply systems. Luckily, in nearby Fiji, there was a paint manufacturer who said that they could mass produce water storage containers in no time at all. Not so luckily, many of the aid agencies in the area said that those would not be up to Oxfam's specification for what a water storage container must be in an emergency, and so instead they were going to have to fly them in. In the meantime, people unsurprisingly decided to go with whatever they could find, including the plastic buckets that were sold to tourists at the beach. As I'm sure you can imagine, that's not an ideal situation. So, my name is Becky of Sindall, and that was a very brief taster of the game show that I have been running at conferences, WASH conferences, international WASH conferences around the world for the last 5 years. I've been doing this with Danny Barrington and Esther Shaler, and the 3 of us collectively are the WASH Failures team. Whilst we do enjoy making idiots of ourselves, normally in sparkly jackets as game show hosts, there is a more serious reason to be doing this, and that's to promote sharing of failures. Talking about failures is understandably something that people are pretty reluctant to do, and the game show acts as essentially an elaborate icebreaker to get people to share their experiences of failure, and then to talk about why failures happen and what we can do to address failure, prevent failure, and learn from failure. That's great, but what's it got to do with no natural disasters? Well, traditionally, the water and sanitation sector sits within international development, and historically, development has seen itself as very separate from humanitarian aid and from peace-building work. So this is an incredibly simplified version of what those 3 sectors do, with development focusing on reducing poverty, humanitarian aid focusing on saving lives after disaster events, and peace-building focused on ending violent conflict. As I'm sure you will have worked out from all of the conversations that we've already had today, there are a lot of linkages between those 3, with each one impacting directly on the other 2. I'm not going to talk about peace building at all. That is very much, conflict is very much Ron's area of expertise, so I will leave that for him. So instead we're going to focus on this link here between development and humanitarian aid. So we all understand that development can impact on disaster in positive and negative ways, but that is a relatively new recognition within the development sector. And everybody loves diagrams with only 4 boxes, So here we have a diagram with only 4 boxes. And you can see up at the top, development can either reduce disaster risk or it can increase disaster risk. And as practitioners in the development space, we have quite a high level of control about where our work sits across those boxes. And I would hope...
Sorry, what is it on the upper one?
So here we've got...
No, in the...
Oh, sorry,
we cannot
it says development and disaster. Sorry,
oh,
yes.
Thanks.
Yes, we've got development, disaster, negative and positive. So I would hope as a development practitioner that my work and the work of my colleagues sits in this top right quadrant where development is reducing disaster risk. However, if programs fail, it's very, very easy for us to slide into this top left-hand box where development increases risk instead. And so with that in mind, you can start to see why human failings and projects that fail can lead to increased risk. And that's one of the reasons that WASH Failures is so supportive of the No Natural Disasters campaign. In 2020, we interviewed over 100 water and sanitation frontline professionals in 4 sub-Saharan African countries to understand what they understood as the causes of failure, what failures they saw, and how we could learn from those failures. And we were able to categorize those into 7 main causes of failure. So the first of those was idealistic planning. We have situations where if you fail to grasp the realities of working in dynamic environments, you very quickly run into problems with insufficient timeline, insufficient budget to achieve all of the activities that you've set out to do in your project. And some of the ones that are most commonly missed are funding for operations and maintenance, ongoing costs, and also for monitoring and evaluation. The combination of funders wanting the most bang for their buck and competition between different organisations also leads to a downward spiral as people compete for funding by over-promising towards the funders that they're trying to impress. This can quite often lead to community engagement, which is tokenistic at best, and in turn that leads to programs that are inappropriate and underused if they are used at all. Politics was something that came up time and time again. Whilst interviewees recognised that governments are important stakeholders, they said that there were a lot of challenges with working with politicians because their focus is so often on re-election rather than service delivery. And any large organisation, particularly government, comes with a solid dose of bureaucracy, as I'm sure most of you are very aware of. In fact, whenever you have multiple stakeholders, it's very easy to end up with confusion, duplication, or gaps in work if there's poor coordination and communication between those stakeholders. The teams also recognised that quite often they didn't have the expertise or the authority to make decisions when things went wrong, either because they felt that they had not had sufficient training to make those decisions, or because the hierarchical structures that they were working within meant that any decisions had to be passed up to supervisors and managers. And then finally, we had a project mentality with a short-term focus meant that people were rushing to get activities done within a short timeline prescribed by a funder, and there was a lack of long-term sustainability of these programs beyond the initial funding period. We said today that funders are a powerful group within these sectors, and that they're important for these types of projects. So we took these findings to 20 organisations that are involved in funding water and sanitation projects, and we asked them if they recognise these issues. Not only did they recognise all 7 of these issues, they also added an 8th, which was the lack of holistic solutions, with far too many water and sanitation projects still focused on infrastructure without the education, behaviour change, and system strengthening that will help to make them last. So that's all very well and good, but what are we doing about it? So at the moment, we are working on some practical guidance, and that should be coming soon. But the fundamental approaches that we advocate for are captured in a manifesto that was developed by conference participants after a game show event at the WEDEC conference in Nakuru, Kenya in 2018. Called the Nakuru Accord, this manifesto consists of 9 behaviours which help to promote a culture of learning, sharing and transparency. And you can read the full version of the Nakuru Accord and sign up to say that you will abide by those behaviours on our website. So this is a step towards individuals and organisations recognising their role in failures. It's also about becoming more accountable for the lasting impacts that those failures can have on the people that we claim to be supporting. It's a recognition of the role that we play in increasing risk for other people through the work that we do, if we're not proactive in anticipating, preventing and learning from failure. In that respect, WASH Failures mirrors the No Natural Disasters campaign in that it's rejecting the status quo and demanding that we take responsibility to tackle our own shortcomings. We are the first to admit that we won't get everything right first time, but we strongly believe that it's time for us all to start failing better in whichever sectors we work in. Thank you.